Well, here's what's happening right now in Ukraine, and it is bad news for NATO. Russian forces have pushed further into Ukraine's Dnipropetrovsk region, marking the 8th region that they're about to take control over. Colonel McGregor revealed to us yesterday on the show that Russian special forces have now entered in Odessa, and they have been targeting strikes against military installations and infrastructure. If they occupy Odessa, of course, what does that mean? That means Ukraine becomes a landlocked country with no seaports. And that means Ukraine effectively ceases to be a real country. And then this, Reuters revealing that NATO and Western partners are crafting military options ranging from a no-fly zone to air defense systems that they're going to be sending in. Of course, I think you have the head of the British Air Force, you have the head of the British Army in Ukraine today, meeting there. Like, once again, like, how many more missile systems? What else can you be throwing into this mess right now? So they have security advisors flying into Ukraine still from the NATO side. So a no-fly zone over Ukraine, yeah, that's going to go well. That would mean NATO is officially at war with Russia, among other things. Meanwhile, right now across Europe, there's growing realization that the continent must shoulder more responsibility in this war. European leaders are saying now that they need to independently defend Ukraine and deter aggression. They can't count on the United States anymore. And then Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, says a peace agreement will likely be on the table by Christmas. Christmas, really? We have to wait that long for peace? 40,000 people? I mean, how many more people are going to die by Christmas time until we can get a peace agreement in place? Former CIA analyst and outspoken NATO critic and friend of the show, Larry Johnson, just penned a new piece on his website, Sonar 21, about how NATO is losing this war badly, but it's much worse than all of that. And Larry Johnson joins us today from Florida. Larry, great to see you. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, good to see you. Good to see Natalie. Usually it's just you and me. So, yeah, I'm glad you brought the better half with you today.
Yeah, clearly. I mean, it always elevates the show when she's around. It lowers it when I'm around. Larry, great to see you. So, you know, you've been doing some incredible writing, and I want to say that I think what you've been doing, really highlighting, the mainstream media is totally ignoring this. They're all in, whether it's the BBC, CNN, it doesn't really matter, but most of the European press is fully on board with like rearming NATO, making sure that NATO has enough weapons to be able to funnel into Ukraine. Advisors have been flying into Kiev, meeting with Zelensky on a regular basis. And you made the point in this new piece that NATO is losing badly. Can you talk about some, just on the battlefield specifically, both military and economically here, what we're looking at from NATO's side?
Well, we saw Donald Trump the other day tweet that the fault of Biden was that he forced the Ukrainians to always be on the defensive, except that wasn't true. We go back to September of 2022 when the Ukrainians launched a counteroffensive against Russian positions, and the Russians basically had no military presence to speak of, just some border police, where they were driven out of the northern part of Kherson, which is north of the Donbass. Then in June of 2023, they launched another counteroffensive, and in the process, they lost between an estimated 200,000 soldiers in a failed counterattack that was completely planned and directed by U.S. military commanders, General Cavoli, among others, sitting in Stuttgart or Wiesbaden. Then in August 2024, Ukraine again launched another offensive into Kursk, and that led to the deaths of 80,000 Ukrainian soldiers. So what we've seen is this repeated pattern where Ukraine is incapable of mounting successful offensives and holding that territory. Russia has pushed back in every single one of those instances. And what's going on right now is what started off in February of 2022 with Russia having about 175,000 soldiers in their offensive into the start of the special military operation. And they were outnumbered about 5-1 by the Ukrainian forces. We now, 3.5 years later, have seen those numbers flip. So that Russia has right now about 650,000 trained soldiers, experienced personnel that have had a minimum 3 to 4 months of training, all on the front lines, all along the line of contact from the Sumy region in the north down to Odessa in the south. Whereas Ukraine is its army is right now estimated to be about 350 to 400,000. The lopsided losses that Western propagandists continue to lie about what Russia's experienced and ignore the true cost for Ukraine. In the most recent exchange of bodies, where Russia turns over the dead Ukrainians that it has captured or taken possession of, and Ukraine does the same with Russian soldiers, Russia received 19 dead Russian soldiers. Russia, in turn, delivered 1,000 Ukrainian dead. So it's a 20-to-1 ratio. For every one Russian soldier that's dying, there are 20 Ukrainian soldiers dying. And what we see taking place, the demographic changes taking place inside Ukraine are horrific. What used to be a country of about 42 million people is now down to about 28 million. And they simply don't have the manpower to sustain these kinds of losses. Excuse me.
Well, just yesterday, Steve Witkoff, the envoy to the Middle East, who is also negotiating this peace deal, said, well, we expect to have some kind of peace deal by the end of the year. And I felt really frustrated by that language because we continue to come here and we're being breadcrumbed. Like, okay, maybe this is it. Maybe that's going to happen. And we keep getting this posturing while you just pointed out people are dying. What do we need to happen between now and the holidays?
Simply listen to the Russians. Listen to what they're saying. They're in Roget's thesaurus, they're going to enter a new synonym for the term sycophant. Witkoff. I mean, the kind of sucking up that he does to Donald Trump is just really disgusting, and it's embarrassing. Well, the Russians have been very clear what their conditions are. Vladimir Putin laid it out on June 14th, 2024. It's been repeated ad nauseum by Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister, by Maria Zakharova, the spokeswoman for the foreign ministry, by Dmitry Peskov, the spokesman for Vladimir Putin, the Medvedev, the former president of Russia. And right now, Russia has said, look, the people in Crimea and Zaporizhia, Kherson, Donetsk, and Luhansk voted to join Russia. The people in Crimea did it in 2015, or in 2014, I take that back, and the people in the other four oblasts did it in September 2022. They've all voted to become part of the Russian Federation. They are now, through the vote of the legislature in Russia, the Duma, they are now officially part of the Russian Federation. So those states are not going to be returned to Ukraine in any form, fashion. There's no land deal. There's no offer to, we'll give you this for that. None of that's going to happen because it is legally part of Russia. In the same sense that Donald Trump couldn't show up in Alaska and say, hey, Vladimir, I'll give you Alaska in exchange for giving back to Donbass. Not going to happen. That's number one. Number two, that there is absolutely no more NATO activity inside Ukraine, and Ukraine is never going to be part of NATO. Now, these are two demands that Russia will not compromise on. And the West, the notion that the West is going to send peacekeeping forces into Ukraine is a suicide mission. The Russians will kill them. They view that as a threat. Russia's already facing two Aegis batteries, one in Romania, one in Poland. The Aegis missile system normally is on a destroyer, but this time they took them off the ships, installed them on land, and the problem with them is that they are capable of firing a Tomahawk cruise missile, which can carry a nuclear warhead. So essentially, Russia is now looking at having nuclear-capable warheads on its border, one in Poland, one in Romania. That's what Russia is trying to get rid of, trying to disarm, push it back. In the same way that we would react very strongly if Russia decided to deploy nuclear missiles to Venezuela, Mexico, or Cuba. We wouldn't tolerate that for a minute either. But, we seem to think we can get away with this. So there's not going to be a negotiated peace deal by December. Ain't going to happen.
I'll get you out of here on this, Larry, about the tariffs. President Trump in the cabinet meeting yesterday said, Zelensky's not been a good guy either. He plays that game. And then he said, willing to put tariffs against Ukraine in order to get them back to the table and make sure that they're involved in this peace process. Would tariffs work against Ukraine? As you pointed out, the population is down to 28 million. They're massively indebted to the IMF. The country is on its last legs as it stands. What would tariffs do?
Nothing. I mean, Donald Trump has it fully in his power. All he has to do is stop sending them money, stop sending them weapons, withdraw the CIA and military advisors that are in country, and also tell Zelensky that he's not going to have a visa to the United States to enjoy his property in Vero Beach. The whole notion that Trump has any leverage with using tariffs or sanctions against Russia, which he's also threatened to do, is just laughable. What we've learned in the course of the last week, and this is why I wrote the article about NATO is losing against BRICS dramatically. All of the major countries in NATO that are the major economies have a debt to GDP ratio of at least 100% or greater. What that means is every day, if you make $100, but you're spending $125, that means you're $25 in the hole. Now do that every day. Well, the next day you're $50 in the hole. Next day you're $75. Next day you're $100. And then it keeps growing. That's the United States. We're 125 to 100 to 100 debt to GDP ratio. England is a little over 100 to 100. It's 1 to 1. France is 110. What this means is they're spending more money than they can take in. Whereas there is not a single country in BRICS, none of the BRICS nations have a debt to GDP ratio that's lopsided. Instead, in Russia, it's 19%. So that means, 19%. And
I had no idea that. I mean, every BRICS nation is poor, or every NATO nation is poor.
Yes.
And no BRICS nations are.
No.
That's shocking.
Yeah, it is. And the other aspect to it is when you look at the economic growth, right now the average economic growth for BRICS, all the BRICS countries combined, 3.6, 3.7%. For NATO, about 1.2%. So, here's NATO making all these big promises about, boy, we're going to spend all this money and we're going to pay for these weapons, and they're broke. The United Kingdom and France are both talking about having to go to the IMF for bailout loans because they are in such desperate economic straits. Not a single BRICS country is in the same position. So, and then just one other sort of interesting tariff note on, four key examples. One, U.S. shipments of propane to China at zero. They've dropped off the table in 2025. It used to be a $4 billion industry. U.S. soybeans, which used to be we were a major supplier to China. China's cut that off. It's now buying from Brazil. Coffee. The coffee that the United States imports from Brazil, it's going to cost us a lot more because Brazil's selling it all to China now. And then yesterday you heard Donald Trump talking about, we're going to have 600,000 visas for all these Chinese students to come back. Gee, why are they doing that? Because the number of American colleges that depended upon Chinese students who paid full freight coming into the country, they're not coming anymore. And Trump has hit too late. What he was reacting to pressure he's received from all these U.S. collegiate and colleges and universities. So the whole tariff thing is backfiring on Trump. And then India has just told Trump to go pound sand. That no, we're not going to stop buying Russian oil. We're going to buy more. So the Trump foreign policy on this is just becoming a disaster.
Well, in fact, I looked this up because recently BRICS had a conference and said that BRICS countries are responsible for upwards of 45% of global GDP.
Correct.
But when you compare that to NATO countries, it's 30% or less. Correct. So it's clear who the heavy hitters are here, and it's not us. And unless we realize that and start playing nice with others, we're going to continue to circle the drain. Is that the point that you're making?
Absolutely. Trump has embarked on a policy of bullying and threatening. And other countries are reacting to that as you would. You and Clayton wouldn't have friends that are constantly calling you names, threatening you, threatening your family. Hey, I'm going to break you. I'm going to bankrupt. And then, hey, let's get together for dinner. You go, what?
Right.
You owe me an apology for starters. So, we've threatened India. We've threatened China. We threatened Brazil. We've even threatened Switzerland. I had an interview with a former member. He's a Swiss citizen, but he's a member of the German army, and he was saying, he said, "Here's Swiss thought we were in pretty good shape with the United States, and Trump's hitting us with tariffs." So it is driving a wedge with other countries that should be our allies, should be our friends, but instead they're turning to BRICS because BRICS doesn't bully.
Yeah, I've been watching this BRICS disaster unfold for a couple of years now, and it's just getting worse. I would encourage everyone to go over to Sonar 21 and read Larry's great piece on NATO and the collapse of NATO and this rise of BRICS right now. Everyone should be paying attention to this. I really sincerely hope people pay attention to it. Larry, great to see you as always. Thank you so much.
Thanks. You guys keep doing the good work. You're getting the word out.
You too.
Thanks so much, Larry. Keep doing the great writing. We appreciate it. Thanks, Larry.
Okay, bye.